The Colombian Civil War is considered one of the longest and most complex conflicts in modern history. Beginning in the mid-20th century, it lasted for over 5 decades and resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands and the displacement of millions. Colombia was profoundly affected by this conflict, which intertwined political, social, and economic factors, making it a painful and intricate story. The roots of the conflict can be traced back to the late 19th century when Colombia was plagued by political struggles between the two main parties. In 1948, the assassination of liberal leader Jorge Eliezer Gaitan ignited a wave of violence across the country. Clashes between supporters of the two parties escalated, leading to a period known simply as La Violencia, during which hundreds of thousands lost their lives. During this time, Colombia also faced economic and social instability. The gap between the rich and the poor widened, leading to widespread popular discontent. Social movements arose demanding reforms, but the government responded with repression, exacerbating tensions. As violence escalated, armed groups began to emerge. In 1964, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, FARC, was founded as a response to the violence and social injustice. Influenced by Marxist ideology, the group sought to establish a socialist state. In contrast, right-wing armed groups like the Auto Defenses emerged to support the government and fight against revolutionary groups. During the 1970s and 1980s, the intensity of the conflict increased. Drug traffickers exploited the chaos to expand their operations. Groups such as the Medellin cartel and Cali cartel fueled the conflict through drug trade financing, complicating the situation further. Colombia became a central hub for drug trafficking, making it a target for numerous military operations by the government and the United States. Local communities suffered immensely as a result of the conflict. Millions were displaced from their homes and towns, and many faced kidnapping and murder. The war resulted in the deaths of over 220,000 people, leaving behind untold suffering. Attacks on civilians created an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty, forcing people to live in constant anxiety. Over the decades, there were several attempts to reach a peace agreement. In 1991, a peace deal was signed between the government and FARC, but it did not last long. Repeated attempts at dialogue often lacked trust between the parties. The 1990s saw a resurgence of violence as armed groups targeted political factions and the military. In 2016, a historic peace agreement was reached between the Colombian government and FARC. The agreement aimed to provide reparations for victims and integrate former fighters into society. It included provisions for creating programs to promote economic and social development in the most affected areas. Despite this, challenges persisted. Challenges included the emergence of new armed groups like the AGC, raising concerns about the stability of peace. Today, Colombia continues to grapple with the aftermath of the Civil War, but there is hope for the future. The government is working to implement the terms of the peace agreement, and efforts to rebuild communities devastated by the conflict are ongoing. Issues of poverty and social discrimination still confront the country, but progress is noticeable in some areas. In the heart of Colombia, people share their stories about the war's impact on their lives. Maria, who was a child during the height of the conflict, recounts how her family lost many friends and relatives. Despite the pain, she finds hope in rebuilding her community. Jose, a former fighter in FARC, now seeks to help youth in his community, trying to guide them away from violence. Despite the progress made, Colombia faces significant challenges. Issues of corruption, drug trafficking, and ongoing violence from new armed groups pose obstacles. The story of the Colombian Civil War illustrates how political and social disagreements can lead to devastating conflicts. However, the Colombian people's desire for peace and change offers hope for a better future.